Welcome to the channel. Thank you everyone for tuning in. On today's video, I'm going to be giving you the full review on the new release by Sugess, the S433. As you can clearly tell, what model this watch is actually homaging. And I've actually got a bit of news for you guys. So Sugess did confirm something which I suspected a few months ago. The watch cases that they use, I used to believe that they are actually, clone grade. And one of the insiders did actually confirm that for me. But obviously, it's unofficial confirmation. So take it as that is. In fact, the GMT model that they do on the sub homages, they actually use a very high quality clone movement as well as a clone case, which is why Sugess's Submariner homage models are of a very high quality. Now, the question for this watch is, being it is a clone grade case, how well is this watch going to be made? What's the quality like? So let's go ahead and cover that. So the first thing we're going to look at is, of course, the specifications. It does have a sapphire crystal. It does come in stainless steel. You've got 100 meters of water resistance with a screw down case back and a screw down crown. Now you also get this in a gold plated version. You get a few different color options. I'll put them up on screen for you guys. You've got your usual colors, the blues, greens, blacks, etc. But then you also got that gold case and green dial and a black dial combination. Now the movement, which is one of the main points about this watch, as you can see, it does state Hi-Beat on the dial. It's a Seagull ST2146. It has a beat rate of 28,800 vibrations per hour, approximated power reserve of around 42 hours, and it does hack and wind, and it also comes with a day and date function. So let's talk a little bit about the movement before we carry on. Now this movement is a clone of the ETA 28362. And with regards to reliability on this movement, I have zero experience with it. I did put it on the time grapher for a short amount of time, and the readings I got were very positive. On the face up and face down position, the watch was very linear, very consistent, running around 1 second a day with a very healthy amplitude as well. But I would say though, is if you know of any common faults with the ETA 28362, then apply the same methods to this clone movement, because it is copying that thing. Let's look at some of the dimensions. It is a 40mm case diameter. I know there's people out there that will expect a 38 or a 36. However, I think 40mm is a happy medium between a lot of people. Also have a 12.5mm thick case. You also have a lug to lug of 48mm, which isn't too bad. The overall weight is 124 grams and the lug width is 21mm. Yes, quite an awkward one. But I think at this point in time you can find some leather straps or some rubber straps, but I mean you wouldn't put this on a rubber strap on AliExpress, coming in at 21mm. Now let's have a closer look at the dial. Now the dial options I mentioned, they are pretty much all of them are sunray or sunburst. Sugess, like normally, they have sent me another dial option to compare, and this is the sort of ice blue version, and you can see that beautiful sunray pattern, and that also comes accompanied with a blued seconds hand. With the white one, and I believe with the green one maybe, because in the pictures it didn't look like it was sunray. It's more of a solid color, and this is not brilliant white, slightly off-white or slightly cream, which it still is a nice color and is a very high quality dial. Now you'll notice something different about this Sugess is that they've opted for a logo. Now I don't really know how I feel about that, and that kind of says a lot, because I was just about happy with the font and the name that they used, but with this addition of a 3D logo which is applied, it has dropped the name further down. So I think just on balance of the dial, I still would have preferred the text if it was just slightly higher. And we've seen them play around with fonts. So we've seen on their GMT sports watches that they went for a more scripted sort of text which stated Sugess, and I really did like that, and I think that it was way better suited to this watch. Now I don't know which one came before and after, and as you guys know, it's always difficult to change those things once you've already got them in production. However, if there was a version 2 or another version, I definitely would like them to use that text and get rid of this goofy looking logo, which it is, because it's just a watch in a sort of cog shape, and for me it doesn't really sit right on the dial. But that's just my opinion, and it's something that you could prefer. The dial also has polished and chamfered hour markers, as you find usually on this type of watch. Very beautifully polished. There's no visible defects to the eye, no smudges, which is very important when we look at watches from China. The handset is similar. It is chamfered and fully polished in that baton shape. Now you've also got the day function at the 12, and you also got the date function at the 3, and you can see that is beautifully magnified at 2.5 times. Very clear and the correct magnification. You've got a bit of text just above the 6, stating Hi-Beat and automatic, and then you've got your railway style minute track, which runs around the dial. So a very clean looking dial. Like I said, there's no sunray, there's no lume on this, so there's not a lot to talk about, except the quality is there. The finishing on the hour markers and indices is what's important. At this point, I would like to show you guys the movement, because one of the features, or the quirks of these ETA movements is that snapping date and date function, and I can confirm this watch has that. So let's unscrew the crown. Now, this crown is pretty small. It's around the 5mm mark, and you guys know how I feel about these smaller crowns. They are always difficult to operate. So let's go ahead and change the date function, and let's have a look at that snap. Just there. I don't know if you caught that, but let me slow it down so you can actually see it happening. So around that 11, yeah, 56, 57 mark. So very satisfying snap. You can feel the spring mechanism in there. It does snap really nicely into place, which further, you want to be careful when moving this movement. You don't want to set the day or the date anywhere between, the AM hours, as per usual with most watches with day and date function. Now, I haven't really seen any clone cases, so I don't really know what I can compare it to. But just something which I noticed, if you look at that fluted bezel, it seems to be just a little shinier. There's a bit more shimmer in it. The polishing is of a very high standard, and the fluting is very smooth. There's no edginess in there at all. It seems to be machined really well, but you definitely do get a different kind of shine. Now, question would be asked is, because if it's a clone case, does it have that 904L steel? That unfortunately I can't answer. I think they still list it as 316L, but I'll ask for further confirmation. But that being said, how do we consolidate the two? Well, if you look at the branding on this watch, you got the S on the crown. You also got S on the bracelet, which I'll show you guys later. And you don't also have the markings that you have on the Rehort, but you do have Sugess in there. So I'm guessing the factory they get it from, it is customizable, and they can make 316 or 904L depending on what the customer is paying for. Now, moving down to the case, you'll find it is fully polished. It's got a very beautiful and smooth sweep. Fully polished watches, we know how people feel about them, but with this style of watch, it is definitely adequate. There's no sharp edges on there. It's just a very sleek looking case. It seems to look a lot thinner than it is, but that's just on the case profile. 12.5mm isn't that thin, and can be considered quite thick, for a watch of this nature. Now, on the other side, I've left the sticker on so you can see what you can see right there. And the guys that know, I think that's further indication that these were possibly clone cases. The case back is expected plain and similar to what we see on all watches of this nature. And now when we turn the case around, you'll see the Sugess branding in the center of the clasp. Now, while I say it's the center, it's slightly towards the top end. Now, I don't know if that should be dead center. It would have looked a bit nicer if it was right in the center of that clasp rather than aligned towards the top. Now, the clasp is a butterfly clasp, but it is the correct mechanism that you'd expect. It is a sort of a hidden clasp, and it does have a very satisfying click, and it opens up really nicely as well. So very smooth and a nice punchy click as well. You can see just that little latch there, and it does a really good job of kind of hiding itself within that bracelet. And I've said it again, and I'll say it again and again, that S is a huge put off. You can find that also on the crown. It needs to be stylized. It needs to be in that scripted font. This just looks like your basic Arial font, and for me it does cheapen that if I see this on watches. I know it's just a font, but for me it's not what I want to look at. Moving on to the bracelet, it is a solid link bracelet. It's got solid end links, polished from the sides. It's a presidential style bracelet. You also got screw-in links, so which is a nice thing to see. Very premium bracelet, and in hand it does feel good. There's no sharpness, no edginess, and the brushing, you can see it is all in the same direction. It doesn't look like that messy brushing that we see on some of the cheaper brands. It is very uniform, and as I said, very fine. And the polish links in the center got beautiful curves on there, and there's no sharp edges that I can feel, and it is quite smooth. One thing about the fitting of these end links, I don't know if it's because that's how they are meant to look. However, with the second link being so short and the first link, as it sits into the case, you can see that second link just protrudes over the case slightly. To me, visually, that's not a nice look, but I don't know if that's just normal or that's expected, but that's just what I think about this. Let's give you a quick comparison between this and the blue dial. You can see when you go for the sunray dials, you'll have just a bit more character in there. You'll get a bit more light play on the dial, and it's always nice seeing sun rays. But I know people have kind of had enough of them, which is where I think this off-white dial, has its own, aesthetic behind it. Very clean. The light isn't reflecting off this as much. It allows the markers and the handset to do all the reflecting for you. So yeah, let's get this on wrist. Let's see how it looks on wrist, and then let's finish up. So we've got the Sugess S433 on my 6.5-inch wrist. Now the diameter that I mentioned and the dimensions, they'll fit perfectly fine on a smaller wrist. In fact, it does look quite good. The 48mm lug to lug does, counteract that very flat case. There's only a very slight curve, and I find these style of watches aren't very comfortable if it's too flat. But this lug to lug is important. The watch does sit nicely. The weight is well balanced. 143 grams isn't that bad at all, and it's got a very good visual, right? Legible, and you can see that light shining across that fluted bezel. That's what makes the watch pop. Yeah, great finishing on there. I see great quality, but like I said, I haven't seen super clone watches, so I wouldn't really know the difference. And this, to me, it seems as good as any other San Martin out there, so I don't think it's that special. Now, in terms of price, out of sale, I don't really know what this price is. I believe it might be over the £200 mark, more around the £220 or £250 mark, just because of the movement used. However, in the sales, it's at £185. So if this video comes out while the AliExpress sale is going on, you will get it for £185, which is quite a bargain. But at the same time, you have to really like everything that this watch does. So in terms of the dial, there's no issues with that. The movement, no issues. Finishing and the quality of the bracelet, I mean, I've got no other issues anywhere else. I would say the crown just slightly fiddly, but these smaller crowns tend to be. The only issue I have is, the issues I've always had with Sugess is that S on the crown and the S on the buckle there. They do need to get away from that logo. And also an issue with the branding. It's, how I really like consistent branding. So they've added this logo on there, which has thrown me off. I don't really like the look of that. And I don't know why they've done it, because obviously the watch, it is homaging, but it just doesn't look right. And also the text, I really did like the text used on the GMT watches. So you can probably change font depending on the style of watch. So if it's a sporty watch, I don't mind that text. If it's a dressy watch, then go for the scripted text. And if it's a diver or something, go for the big, bold and blocky text. And I've got no issue with that. I think that kind of fits in with the watch. £185. What are the alternatives? I know there's a few, there's not a lot. Some of the cheaper ones like Pagani Design or Cadison, yes, they'll do the trick. In fact, the Cadison C81, maybe 35 or something does come to mind, but this does feel quite a lot better. It's a lot thinner, it's not as bulky as those. There is definitely an element of refinement in here, but against the San Martin, I'd say the San Martin was very close to this, if not perhaps a little better. But again, I say that, guys, from having held that watch about 2 years ago, so don't quote me on that, and don't take my word on that. But for what this is, £185, this is definitely a very high quality offering for the price, with a really good movement as well. It's just a couple of subjective things which may bug you. So that's it from me today, guys. Hope you enjoyed that review, and I will see you on the next video.